In the 5.5 livestream, we finally saw Ifa, who many players, including myself, have been quite hyped for, and here we saw that he actually has an Anemo vision, which has come to the surprise of many, as it was the general consensus that he would be Pyro due to the Flower Feather clan having a Pyro Rayab and Saurian, with Ifa's own Saurian being the Pyro Saurian as well. I have seen a lot of people are disappointed that he isn't Pyro, but it might actually be better that he's a Nemo, because as Pyro, he'd be competing with extremely powerful characters like Mavwika and Xiangling as an off-field DPS/Pyro applier, and he'd be competing with Bennett as a healer or buffer. Mavwika and Bennett are arguably the two best characters in the entire game right now, so that's very tough competition. We do already have a lot of Anemo characters, but there are a lot of cool and unique things that can still be done with the Anemo element that have not been done yet. So in today's video, I'll go over some ideas that I think Ifa could and should have in his kit to be a strong and unique character in the meta. One quick disclaimer before we get started, we do not look at or discuss leaks on this channel, so if you have any leaked information whatsoever, please do not mention it in the comments as your comment will be deleted. With that said, let's get started. Alright, so right off the bat, it's very logical to assume Ifa will be a healer, as he is a Saurian doctor with a white lab coat and all. A complaint with him being an Anemo healer I've seen is that we already have Sayu, Jean, Mizuki, and Xianyun as healing Anemo units, so he'd be covering a role that we already have plenty of characters for. The thing with that though is, while Shan Yun is strong, she's very niche and only actually optimally used in like 3 teams. Then Mizuki hardly counts as a healer to begin with how bad her healing is. And Gina and Sayu are not very good because they don't buff other than 4-piece VV. So despite Anemo healer being a saturated role already, there's not really any good characters that he'd be competing with in that role. Should Ifa be an Anemo healer, he will be better than the likes of Jean and Sayu by default, due to being able to use Scroll instead of VV, but he will need to have great buffing in addition to that to actually be a very good character. So what type of buffing should he have? As far as Anemo characters go, we currently have EM buffing covered by Sucrose, pure Anemo damage covered by Faruzan, Plunge covered by Jianyun, and Pyro Hydro Electro Cryo damage bonus covered by Kazuha. I don't think Ifa will be providing any of these buffs since they are already covered very well by others, but there are plenty of unique ways he could buff instead. As an example, here is one idea I've thought of. With his skill, have Ifa summon his Saurian, Kakuku, which deals AoE Anemo damage, and can absorb elements in a similar fashion to other Anemo abilities such as Kazuha and Venti's bursts. After Kakuku absorbs an element, Ifa enters his Night Soul Blessing state. While in the Night Soul Blessing state, he provides a base damage buff, which is the type of buffing characters like Shenhe and Yunjin provide, to your active character, and it will apply to all of their Anemo damage, as well as damage of the absorbed element type. Ifa's Night Soul points go down every second, and he restores Night Soul points anytime a party member triggers a swirl reaction. Once Ifa is out of the Night Soul Blessing state and out of Night Soul points, his buff expires. Buffing like this could be very good because base damage buffs are great for a lot of different characters, in particular characters that have high hit counts, but it would still be great for lower hit count, higher multiplier characters, since he is providing scroll on top of that. We do not have a lot of base damage buffers in this game, and the few that we have are extremely niche like Yunjin, Xianyun, and Shenhe, only buffing very specific types of damage, and also not buffing properly in AoE. Since with this kit, Ifa's buff would be tied to his Night Soul rather than having a set amount of stacks, you would actually get the buff on every enemy in AoE. However, I did add the condition that he needs Swirl to restore Night Soul points and maintain the buff. I added that because Swirl as a reaction I feel needs more ways to be more useful, especially with DPS like Wanderer and Zhao. With this, their high frequency of Anemo application would finally be useful for something other than just breaking shields. Ifa's own swirls would count towards maintaining the Night Soul so that he can still have a decent buff uptime even as solo Anemo, just a lot more with Anemo on the team. So something very cool about Something very cool that this could create is a double Anemo buffing car, with Ifa on Scroll and Kazuha on VV. Double Anemo really isn't something we've ever seen outside of Farazan plus an Anemo DPS, so it would be very cool for this to be a new type of wheelchair car. Alternatively, another cool thing they could do for how Ifa buffs is have him provide a different buff depending on what element he absorbs, similar to Shalone in C2, but make the buff apply to everyone, not just characters of the corresponding element. If they were to go this route, I would hope they get a bit more creative than the typical attack for Pyro, HP for Hydro, Energy for Electro, and Crit for Cryo. Instead, maybe they could do a bit differently, like Pyro buffs your attack scalings rather than the attack stat itself. Hydro buffs crit damage, Electro Elemental Mastery, and Cryo damage bonus. Mainly because if Hydro is HP, then in Furina teams he'd lose a ton of value if you're not using an HP scaling DPS. Plus, the typical energy for Electro tends to not be great since Electro DPS are usually playing Electro anyway, so EM would be really nice to maybe make Quicken and Quick Bloom teams see more use. Alternatively, something I can see Ifa doing instead of being a buffer is being a sub DPS. The reason I can see him having this role is he's probably running in 5.6, and Venti is in the second half of 5.5. Natlan has had a pattern of attempting to quote-unquote power creep characters around the time of their rerun. As an example, Mualani at the failed attempt at power creeping Novelette, Shilonen with Kazuha, Seedlali with Zhongli, and Mavrika with Alakino, so it could very well be Venti's turn now. If this is the case, there is huge potential for Ifa to be fantastic, as an Anemo sub DPS could potentially deal incredible damage. This is because Farazan's buffs are team-wide, so they would get fully buffed by her even if they don't snapshot. This is basically an unfilled role currently, as the only things even close to an Anemo sub DPS right now are Lynette, Kazuha, and Venti, but their multipliers are very low for sub DPS standards, as they aren't really designed for this role. Should Ifa be an Anemo sub DPS with really high multipliers, I can see him having good grouping as an additional utility, because as mentioned, he'd be the Venti power creep attempt. I don't think the grouping would be as good as Venti's, but would be better than everyone else's. I see it working like C6 Farazan, where his grouping occurs each time on a certain damage instance, which he deals from R field every few seconds, maybe 2 seconds compared to R3, while also having a stronger pull. The only issue with a kit like that is, an Anemo sub DPS would lose a lot of value if not being used in a team with Farazan, so he would mainly be good with the likes of Wanderer and Zhao. But if the multipliers are high enough, he could still do decent damage without Farazan, just not a crazy amount, while having the second best grouping in the game, buffing with Scroll, and ideally also having elemental absorption so he can be an Anemo element applier at the same time. This would make him still very useful in a lot of non-Anemo DPS teams as well. But those are the main ideas I have for what Aoife's kit might be like. I don't see him being a shielder since we just had Lanyan. Maybe if he's a 5-star, he could be a 5-star version of her, but I really don't see it. Perhaps I could see him providing some form of micro shielding in addition to healing, kind of like Baizu, but I would hope not, because Hoyo would likely decide to not give him much offensive utility in that case, just like they did to Baizu. I also don't think Ifa will be an on-fielder since we already had both Mizuki and Chaska as on-fielders. Granted, neither Mizuki nor Chaska is a traditional Anemo hypercarry, so Ifa could be the first one of those that we've had since Sumeru, but seeing as he's a doctor, being an on-fielder doesn't seem likely. And yeah, that's about all I have to say. I'm very excited for Ifa, hoping very hard for him to be an excellent supportive kit that works very great with my Wanderer, since Ifa will be the only Natlan support capable of buffing Anemo with Scroll. But I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. Are you excited for Ifa? Are you glad he's a Nemo? Or disappointed that he isn't Pyro? What do you think his kit will or should be like? Let me know in the comments down below. Also feel welcome to join my Discord where we can talk about this directly. Thanks and goodbye.